Hello, Metro Augusta. Hello, Georgia. And hello, wherever you are. This is Janice Allen Jackson welcoming you to the August 6th edition of Local Matters, a show designed to make you a more confident voter and a more engaged citizen. As always, today's show is brought to you as a service of my consulting firm, which is Janice Allen Jackson and Associates. You can learn more about me and services provided through the firm by visiting our website, which is janiceallenjackson.com. As always, we ask you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. There we post links to every episode, and we also provide news articles and other information that can be helpful to you. If you were with us last week, you know that I discussed the superintendent search for the Richmond County Board of Education. Uh, if you missed that episode, we invite you to please go back and listen to it because, in some respects, it is a companion episode to today's. Today, we have a guest run for the position of state school superintendent, and we discussed some of the challenges that school systems like Richmond County are currently facing, particularly as it relates to funding and as it relates to the need for more certified personnel in schools. We also touch on some of the hot button topics in Georgia and throughout the country, like school choice. So, thanks for being a part of our family. If you missed last week, please go back and listen. That one is only available on our audio platforms, which are, of course, Spotify, SoundCloud, and Apple Podcasts. Uh, but we invite you, if you missed them, to go back and listen to that. Um, Thank you again so much for being a part of our Local Matters family, and we hope you are edified by today's episode. Local Matters family, we are joined by a very special guest today. He is Dr. Randell Trammell. He is running for the office of Georgia State School Superintendent. That race is going to take place sometime in the future, a few months out. So we're going to concentrate our conversation today on just what that office does, learning more about Dr. Trammell. And we are so fortunate that he reached out to us. You all know that I meet people in various ways. Sometimes I connect with them on social media, i.e. LinkedIn. Sometimes I meet them at a conference. Sometimes they're folks I've known forever. And Randall's one of those that I met at a conference a couple of years ago now. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
If you could start off in the tradition of Local Matters to tell us a little bit about who you are. So please do.
Janice, so glad to be with you all in the Local Matters family today. So I'm Randell Trammell. I am Georgia born, Georgia bred, and good Lord willing, one day I'll be Georgia dead. I grew up in North Georgia, up in Dalton. So that twang that you hear in my voice is that Southern Appalachian, Eastern Tennessee kind of twang. But grew up here in Georgia. Went to public schools. Went to Reinhardt University in the sprawling metropolis of Waleska, Georgia, the suburb of Canton, and got an undergrad there in religious education. Went back and got a master's of business administration there, and then went on and got my doctorate in education from Northeastern University up in Boston. It was a hybrid program. I had to spend a couple weeks each summer up in Boston, which is just beautiful in the summer. And then I have been with the organization that I serve, the Center for Civic Engagement, since 2004. It started out as the State YMCA of Georgia, and then we made some transitions and it has become the Center for Civic Engagement. So I have a long history here in Georgia my entire life. I can't think of a better place to live.
Cool beans. You have been in Georgia then for most of your life. I'm one of the ones born and raised here, left, came back, but absolutely love my state, love my city. So glad to meet somebody similar to me in that regard. Tell us about the Center for Civic Engagement, because that was actually how we met. You were representing the organization at that time. I'm still active with the Georgia City County Management Association, and Randall was one of our presenters at our spring conference. I believe that was in Athens, if I'm not mistaken. And you talked about the whole business of making sure that young people know something about how governments work. Can you expound a little bit on the work of the Center for Civic Engagement?
Absolutely. So it started out in 2014 when I was doing my doctoral research on civic education in Georgia. And I discovered that back in 2008, 2009, when the economy had the big downturn, that the University of Georgia had, through the Carl Vinson Institute, had stopped their K-12 education outreach program, and that was because some people had retired and budget cuts, so it was convenient to do that. But what that left was a gaping hole in civic education and resources in Georgia. So I'm like, okay, well, somebody's got to do this. So I did, and we started the Center for Civic Engagement. And quite frankly and simply put, our mission is to educate and equip students to become informed and active citizens. And we do that through a number of things. But first off, the baseline is we believe that students must have civic knowledge. They must know the reason that we have, our Constitution and all of those foundational documents and pillars of our democracy, if you will. And then they've got to have civic identity. Each of us have an identity of who we are. And so that civic identity is just as important. Do I vote? What do I believe in? And I will be very, very clear that the Center for Civic Engagement is a nonpartisan organization. We teach students the process, and we hope that the process gets them before the politics does, quite frankly.
It's a nice way to put it. And are you just affiliated with certain school systems? Where does the work take place?
So we actually we're open to serve all Georgia schools across the state, both public, private, homeschool, and our work has taken off. And so in the fall, we'll actually be in 5 states. We'll be in Mississippi, South Carolina, Virginia, Florida, and then, of course, here in Georgia.
Cool beans. That is very helpful. Obviously, that is the basic premise for local matters is that people don't understand how government works, particularly at the local and state levels, because they don't get as much attention as the federal government does in terms of media coverage. So that was why I wanted to do this. So
to that point, your local government is what touches you the most.
yes,
Unless you have a job, or maybe Augusta has a big community with the base, but unless you have something like that in your community, by and large, when there's a federal government shutdown, it doesn't affect most people immediately. But let me tell you something, if your local city or county government shuts down, you're going to feel it immediately, whether that's, trash pickup or, red lights. So it's so important that our citizens be educated and involved with local government.
it really is. It really is. And thank you for sharing that about your background. So you got a doctorate in education. Does that mean at some point you were teaching at the K through 12 level or college level?
I have been a college professor. I've actually never taught in the K-12 level in a traditional sense, as I've never had a homeroom. But obviously, the organization I run and have been involved with the last 23 years, I'm very much an educator. In my time here, I've served over 1 million students. So each year, about 250,000 students here recently. So definitely an educator. Have not necessarily had a homeroom. I've taught in the schools of education at Northeastern, and of course Reinhardt University. I've taught in the School of Education, School of Business, and so certainly have had a lot of experience in teaching.
Okay, awesome, awesome. So tell me, did you just wake up one morning and decide, gee, I ought to run for a state school superintendent? That thought, yeah.
Well, that's a funny story. No, I mean, listen, I love what I do. I've got a wonderful organization that I serve, and we're making a difference. But Georgia's #1 state to do business in, and has been for well over a decade. We've got, Georgia Bulldogs, in my opinion, #1 in college SEC football. But when it comes to where we rank nationally in education, some rankings have us at 17 U.S. World National Reports. The most recent ranking from the Annie E. Casey Family Foundation ranks Georgia at number 32. And I'm just not happy with that. I think that we can do better. I think our students deserve better. My wife is a public school teacher. My 3 kids are in public school. My youngest goes into kindergarten this year. My oldest goes into 4th grade. So I'm vested, and I want to make sure that Georgia is the best in everything we do. And I just don't think we're hitting that mark in education right now. And through my organization and through my own children, I've always told the students that I work with, be the change you want to see in the world. And if you're going to complain about something, quite frankly, you need to put up and fix it or you need to shut up. And so I'm not the type to shut up. So that's why I'm throwing my name out there to see if we can bring some innovation and some excellence to everything we do in Georgia education.
We appreciate you sort of taking the bull by the horns and saying, hey, if I got to complain about something, I need to try to do something about it personally. How much power does the state superintendent's office really have? I mean, what are they really responsible for?
Well, they oversee the agency. So the Department of Education is a very large agency in terms of budget. In Georgia, we spend over 50% of our state budget on education. So in that terms, it's enormous power. They control the policy with the state school board. The state school board, which is appointed by the governor, sets the policy in consultation with the state school superintendent, who is an ex officio member of that board. And then the superintendent's office and the department is responsible for implementing that policy. The state school superintendent serves as the chief advocacy officer for public education in Georgia. And that's, with external constituents, but also with the legislature. And, anytime there's a public education issue, the superintendent should be at the Capitol in those committee meetings, in those budget hearings, really advocating for our teachers, for our students, for our schools, for our school districts. So there's enormous influence and to a certain degree in terms of controlling standards and the direction of public education, enormous power as well.
Thanks for that. And as you talk about advocacy for public education, there are those who believe that public education is under attack in our state with the funding. And I can't remember what that program is called, where basically parents can opt to send their children to private school and get funding from the state to help offset those expenses. Can you recall the name of that
Is that the
program?
Promise Scholarship Program?
Scholarship. That's exactly what I was thinking about. There was obviously a great deal of concern about public money, our taxpayer dollars being used to send kids to private schools. And of course, those who advocated for that, I'm assuming their position was if your public school is not doing what you need it to do, you need to have some other alternatives. So personally, I mean, did you have an opinion about that? What do you think in terms of policy? Do you think that's a good policy, bad policy, neutral? What do you
Yeah,
think about it?
so that's a great question, Janice, and there's a lot of minutia to that. So people are essentially what you're talking about school choice. And I like to rephrase that and say parent choice. So let me, I'll be very clear. I am a supporter of parent choice. But as the chief education officer for the public schools of Georgia when elected, let me tell you, I want to make sure that your local elementary, middle, and high school down the street from your house is so excellent in delivering what we need to for your student to succeed, that public school is the choice. And that is my job when elected to make sure that those schools are properly resourced, that those schools have great teachers, that those schools have everything they need to create an environment where every single child can succeed. Now, I realize that there are times when the public school system fails to meet that promise. And in those cases, I am supportive of the parent being equipped with the choice to make the right decision for their child. Now, let me be clear. I think that we need to make sure that there's proper accountability for those public funds that are being diverted to other educational opportunities. I think we need to make sure that there's accountability and that we're getting a return on that investment, because essentially that is a public investment in each child. And school choice also is much broader rather than public and private. It could be interdistrict school choice. So I'm zoned to go to XYZ school, but I feel like ABC school fits my child better. And so it's a charter school, homeschool. So there's a lot of options rather than just public versus private.
Okay. Do those dollars also support homeschooling as well? 'Cause I'm
So
not,
under the
you
new
know?
program, it's a
Uh-huh.
qualified education expense program. So you've got to look and see exactly what those qualified education expenses are. So certainly curriculum and stuff like that. But again, that's where you've got to have accountability and to make sure that, Bubba and Susie are opening up a homeschool to create a profit center for themselves. And that actually did happen in Arkansas, and they had to go back and kind of pull back the reins and add some accountability measures. So I think that we just need to make sure that we have a responsible conversation with the policymakers in the legislature to make sure that we're serving our students the best we can, to get those educational outcomes that we all need in Georgia.
Yeah, it seems like it walks a fine line when you're advocating for public education, but then you see dollars going in other places. And, I'm sure the ultimate goal is to make sure that each child has the opportunity for the best possible education.
Right. That's right.
Um, and sometimes that comes in different forms, shapes, etc.
At the end of the day, I'm always going to be the advocate for public schools. I grew up in public school. My wife's a public teacher. My kids are in public schools. But I also understand the importance of equipping parents with the ability to make the best decision for their children.
Yeah, I've got two kids. Mine are older than yours. Both of them are in their 20s. Woohoo! And college
I'm still
graduates
in the
at this
thick of
point.
it. Pray for me.
You are. These kids have been educated in Charlotte, North Carolina. We moved from Charlotte to Augusta when one was in high school and the other was in middle. And we have done a variety of approaches. We've done regular schools, magnet programs. We've done private school a little bit. My son spent the last couple of years of his high school life in a private Christian school environment here in Augusta. And I have found that what works for each child can be very unique. It's unique to the child. They're different. Their approach to school sometimes needs to be different. They're looking for different things from school environments. My daughter graduated from a magnet program here in Augusta, Richmond County Technical Careers Magnet, which I think was the newest magnet program that Richmond County offered at that time. She graduated back in 2019, so I've been out of this for a while. But a month or so ago, a friend of mine sent me a document that showed the percentage of uncertified personnel in each school in Richmond County. And the school that she graduated from was a number that wasn't alarming. It was like 10%, 12%, something like that. I always know there's going to be some movement, and I could see, a small percentage, like 10 or 12%, may be teen for a school, high school, but some of the other schools, particularly when you got in the middle and the high school levels, there were some schools in Richmond County that were over 40%
Wow.
uncertified personnel. And if I haven't looked at the list in a couple weeks, but I think there was some that were over 50%. And as you talk about advocating for resources and teachers, being a primary role of the superintendent, what does the state think when you've got those sorts of numbers of uncertified personnel in a school? I mean, what do alarm bells go off in your head at that point?
So, absolutely, a couple points to that. Number one, I've recently finished up my tenure on the SACS COC Board of Trustees. And that group provides college accreditation to universities and colleges. And there is a litmus test that each university has to, and college has to go through of making sure that they have a number of appropriately credentialed personnel to offer XYZ program, if that makes sense. And if they do not, then that college or university is in danger of losing its accreditation. The same thing is true in the medical community, right? I mean, you have Joint Commission coming in, JACO, and they look at the credentials of the personnel. I mean, let's just talk about going to your local hospital. Do you want 50% of the medical staff being inappropriately credentialed or trained, not necessarily trained? The answer is no. There is no professional situation. Do you want a lawyer, your lawyer's office that, or accountant? The truth is there is no professional situation where we would accept those type of numbers. So then you have to pan out and zoom out and say, okay, what is the cause of this? And we certainly have a teacher pipeline issue. And that's for a lot of reasons. Teachers are not respected and valued as they once were. There's discipline issues in the schools. Right now, within 3 years, I think the latest statistic I read is that some 40 to 50% of new teachers in that 3 year span leave the profession altogether. Growing up, one of the sayings I heard is, you always want to make sure people are coming in the front door, but you also want to make sure they're not leaving out the back door if you're trying to grow an organization. And so we've got to see why our teachers are leaving the profession, but we also have to build that pipeline to get them in there. The state has done a good job in recent years, the legislature and the governor's office, of increasing teacher pay. It still, I don't think, is where it needs to be. Quite frankly, you can go to Buc-ee's and make more money working at Buc-ee's than you can as a teacher with a graduate degree. But that's problematic. If our teachers, if we have a critical mass of educators that are not appropriately credentialed and trained and certified, then how can we expect the education they receive as students to pass any sort of test or to be quality? And that's not to say that these individuals aren't good people. Just because they don't have a teaching degree, it doesn't say that they don't love students. I'm not making any value judgment on that. But and I understand that the schools sometimes just need a person with a pulse to be in a classroom, but that should be the exception and not the standard.
Yeah. And thanks for that. In terms of context, do you, well, couple questions I want to ask. I'm sure there's some people who would make the argument that someone who is not certified isn't necessarily a bad teacher, and somebody who is certified maybe wouldn't make the greatest teacher.
I've
I
seen both sides.
Yeah, I guess that argument could be made, but as you talk about standards, well, I think there's got to be some standards in place for that.
Too,
Mhm.
so it is not uncommon to have teachers come in so let's say that I have a history degree, but I didn't go through a teacher preparation program and did not get certified to teach. But I'm certainly qualified to teach history, right? That's
Yeah.
we could talk about the American
You know
Revolution or
history.
whatever.
Uh-huh.
Exactly. I'm a content specialist. So there are a number of alternative preparation programs where the teachers can get that licensure or those certificates. Or for example, let's talk about in the career technical lane. You've got somebody who's been a mechanic for 25 years and is wanting to go in to teach shop. There are paths. Certainly that is a professional, they are an industry expert. So there's a path for them to receive that credential to be able to be a certified teacher. And there's an incentive too, because those that are not certified teachers, their pay is significantly less than a teacher. So I mean, there is that incentive on that end as well.
And do you have enough information at this time? I know you're not in the role yet, but do you have enough information this time to know how many of those folks who may start off, as you said, somebody who's just a history expert, who starts off in the classroom, decides to stay with it, and eventually achieves that certification? Do you know if there are any reliable numbers out there
I
of
would have to
people who do?
check. I would have to
Uh-huh.
check and see. The program is called Georgia TAP, Teacher Alternative Preparation Program. I know that they track that information. I'm not in a spot where I've got those latest numbers to share, with any reliability, but I do know that they track that information.
So I guess I say that to say, hopefully there's some reason for optimism here if you do get somebody that knows the subject matter and who likes being in the classroom. There seems to be a path to get them from uncertified today to certified later on so that they can indeed increase or improve the numbers that we now, those numbers, that set of numbers I looked at could
That's right.
change. if they're able to hold on to those folks.
And you know
Um,
what better person to be in the classroom teaching than someone who has been in the business industry?
mhm,
You're teaching marketing, someone who's actually been in marketing, rather
mhm.
than someone who's just studied it and tells you, clinically this is it. But somebody who's actually been a practitioner, that I think is important. And to that end, our educational system is still following a 100-year-old model, right? I mean, we're following an assembly line model. And to the point that you made earlier with your children, they're different. My son and my two daughters are all different. They have different interests, different needs. So I think we need to modernize our education system to be responsive to those children's interest and their gifts and their graces and their skills to be able to help them be their very best for their pathway.
Exactly, exactly. So, as you think about education in Georgia, I hear things, the state could take over somebody's school system. Does that happen often?
It does happen, and it happens for a number of reasons. You can, one that comes to mind that happened probably about a decade ago is Clayton County down in the southern metro area. If a school system fails to meet certain benchmarks, and finances are some of them, then the state has the right to come in and take over that system with the hope of rehabilitating it and getting it back up to meeting those qualifications and those standards that are set forth by the state school board. I would have to look and see, if there's been any recent examples of that. I'm sure that there have been, but that was the most stark one that stood out for me in the last decade, just because it was such a large school system.
Yeah, right. Clayton is a county 200,000 plus, I think, in terms of population. So, yeah, I bet that was something that was, yeah, there had to be some serious reasons for the state to have taken that in.
School finances right now are really challenging and stretched. I heard the superintendent of Fulton County Schools most recently say that, they're in danger of being bankrupt in the next school year. I mean, and Fulton is huge. So, and of course, a lot of our communities are up in arms right now over property taxes. So, kind of understanding where the money comes from for school systems. About 17 to 20% comes from the federal government. About 47% comes from your state government. And the rest of that, so 30, 37, 36%, comes from local property tax digest. And so that's where your local school board is able to set what is called the millage rate. A lot of communities are up in arms about that right now, because of the tax digest and what your property taxes are on your home and all of that. But that is important, and it helps fund the operation of the local school system. Now, I think the school systems have to be responsible in spending the taxpayer dollars and make sure that they're not too bloated in administration, or that they're making wise financial decisions, just like you and I have to do with our own budgets. We have to live within our means, but that is something that is big in the local communities.
Education, I'm sure it's not just a Georgia phenomenon, but a lot of forces are at work that really aren't helping the school systems out. One is not having enough revenue, having taxpayers balk at paying more in terms
Right.
of taxes, because like, well, why am I paying to support a product that's failing? I think I've
Well, and I
heard
don't
that
have any kids
line.
in the system, so why am I paying?
Yeah.
And that's a public good. And to the same question of, well, did you call 911 this year? You did it. You said the fire truck didn't come to your house, the police didn't. That's fine, but
But you're paying for it.
you're paying for it. But when you pick up that phone and you call 911, you expect someone to answer. So it's one of those public goods that we do because we want our community to be good.
A lot of systems are having problems holding on to teachers, and it's ironic as you talk about the pay. as I understand it, the pay increases the longer you stay in. Folks aren't staying in long enough to reap the benefits of that. That also creates an adverse set of consequences for the school
And it
system. So,
also, as the teacher continues and gets a master's degree or a specialist
mhm.
or a doctorate, each degree they get about a $7,000 raise. So it encourages them to really hone their trade and enhance their skills and their knowledge as well.
And we know teaching has gotten a lot more difficult than it used to be. There's the whole business of all the testing and, feeling like they have to teach to the test. There's the business of some kids who aren't terribly well behaved. There's the business of some parents who aren't terribly well behaved. All of
What
that.
I hear now, interesting to that point, is a lot of teachers and school administrators are getting out, not because of the kids, but because of the parents.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. I saw an article, some news story with a bus driver. This was years ago. Bus driver who had driven for 30 or 40 years or something, and they asked him how life had changed for him over that time period. And he said, when I started 40 years ago, if a child did something on the bus and the parent was waiting for the child at the bus stop, I would tell the parent, and the parent would spank the child or, tell the child, hey, that's not appropriate. You got to be more respectful, et cetera, et cetera. And then by the end of his tenure as a bus driver, he would say that to a parent, and they would say, well, you're picking on my kid. It went from, being appreciative that the bus driver was reporting the child's negative behavior to being totally unappreciative and being mad at the driver for saying something about the kid's behavior.
Yeah. My baby, my angel could not have possibly have done that.
Right, right, right. And I know that that is totally different from the way I was raised, but yeah, that's happening as well now. That's making it more difficult for schools to really do their job in terms of educating the children. As we prepare, we got just a couple minutes left on this conversation as we prepare to close out. Please tell us when the elections take place.
Yeah. So this is going to be on the 2026 election calendar. And so I am in a primary election. So the Republican and well, the primary is May 19th of 2026. And of course, if there's a runoff, it'll be in June. And then the Democratic and the Republican nominees for each of the positions will be on the November ballot the first Tuesday in November of 26. And this is going to be a big election, right? I mean, you've got U.S. Senate, you've got governor, lieutenant governor, attorney. I mean, all the state's constitutional officers are on there, along with your local state representatives and senators.
And here locally in the Augusta area, we'll have a lot on our ballot as well. I think the mayoral race is on the ballot here in Augusta, as well as half of our Augusta Commission seats. So, as well as school board seats, I think there'll be some of those on the ballot too. So, there'll be lots of reasons to turn out in 2026 to go to the polls. All right.
Right.
Is there anything else you want folks to know about yourself or the Office of State School Superintendent and why they should care?
Well, I mean, they've got to care because this is our future. And if we want to remain the number one place to do business in America, then we've got to make sure that we have the number one place to do education in America. We've got to make sure that our kids, when they graduate, are employable and that there's somebody that you want working for you and with you. And, if you can remember nothing else about me, is just remember I am 100% for excellence in education.
And we appreciate that. We need 100% excellence in education. Thank you so much. Do you have a website set up yet where people can
I
learn more?
do. I do. It is Trammell, Trammell, 4 spelled out FOR, Georgia.com. Trammell for Georgia.com.
So much for being us. Whenever you join us for an episode, you become a member of our family. So you are now a member of the Local Matters family.
Well, thanks so much and great talking to you, Janice.
I close with my favorite Bible verse. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound